Well, welcome to today's rant. And the title today is Awesome or Awful? Which is it? Now, awful was originally two words that came together, were put together, that meant full of awe. So it didn't originally mean something bad, it meant something full of awe. Could be good or bad. Awesome, we tend to think of, some awe. So I'd rather be full of awe at the great things that God is doing, and He is really doing some major things. There have, been times when, years ago, when things were happening so intensely, so fast, almost without even having time to ponder the last thing that happened, another awesome thing was happening where I really sat down and said, this is getting better than the book of Acts. Well, I'm getting there again. And you can just feel it building. We have had several of the most incredible weeks here. We had the Harvest Conference, and that was off the charts. It was, to me, the clearest trumpet call I think I'd ever heard, not just in our conference, but any conference I'd ever been to, if you took all the words together. And I'm still pondering, still going through those. I do go back over them, go over my notes and all, and it's still, so much to process. Just incredible things that happened there. And then we just had our KBA, Kingdom Business Association, gathering last week. Same thing, we had a packed house, had Lance Wallnow, Bobby Connor, Ed Silvoso, some others. And it was like a continuation of the harvest. Really high level stuff coming out. And now I'm a word guy. I love miracles and everything. But to me, I love revelation. I love learning. I love hearing more about God, or understanding more, or getting more insight into what He's doing. And I tell you, these were full times, but they fit together. They kind of dovetailed together, the messages. And we had Daniel Kalinda, we had Jeremiah Johnson, we had Todd Bentley, we had Lou Engle at the first one. But if you could put all those together, which, hey, by the way, I'm going to do. I'm going to get all of those messages put together on a single, either, memory stick or some really inexpensive way to get them out there. And we will circulate those, because it would be well worth it to get a picture of what is going on today, the important things that are unfolding in God right now. It would be powerful to put all of those from both conferences together. So I'm going to do that, okay? Now I want to talk about some other things rather than getting into the details. I'll be sharing some of the things that we got to in time, but everybody's still reeling from the attack in Pittsburgh, that synagogue. Unbelievable. The worst hate crime, worst such massacre in our history. They said, that, I don't know how it could be worse than what happened to that church in Charleston, but they were both terrible. And this targeting, the Jewish people. The other one was targeting blacks. And, both of them were racist, motivated. That's what qualifies something as a hate crime, when it's racial hatred. And, but just terrible. And, I so appreciate, after that devastating attack on that church in Charleston, that next weekend, a delegation from that church, a number of them came to our church to share and encourage us the next Sunday. Couldn't wait. How could you be hurting any more than that, to have your friends and neighbors and some family members slaughtered like that in your church, and then their thing was to go out and comfort others. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, how much my level of respect for them. As AME Zion Church, which I love those churches, but we're not AME Zion. We're not, uh, not even denominationally affiliated or anything. They just called and asked if they'd come see us and speak to us. What an incredible time it was. And, now when people, I didn't expect them to, I didn't expect anybody to do something like that. But what can we do for them? How do we overcome this evil with good? Isn't that what we were instructed to do? Overcome evil with good? Now, I know one thing we used to do. We've got 11/11 coming up right now, November the 11th. Now, many of I talk to people all the time, say every time they look at their clock, it seems it's 11/11. What does that mean? They know it means something. I think it speaks of Isaiah 11:11, which is when the Lord promises Israel that even though he scatters them a second time, he will regather them a second time and restore them to their land. Now, at the time Isaiah wrote that, they hadn't even been dispersed from their land the first time under Nebuchadnezzar. That was hundreds of years future yet. But he promised them, I'm going to regather you a second time. And so they were, God's already saying, look, it's going to happen to you twice. I'm going to get you back here both times, totally restore you to land. So that's one of the great verses on restoration, a second chance. Of course, with God, it's second hundredth chance or second thousandth chance. I mean, he just never gives up on us, never leaves us or forsakes us. But that's one of the great promises in Scripture. And I think also, to me, one of the greatest tragedies in history, in modern history, was November the 11th, which is called Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night. In German, it means crystal knot, but it was called that because it was the night of the broken glass. And that was when the official persecution of the Jewish state, the Nazi government, they officially began their persecution against the Jewish people, attacked their homes, their businesses, everything. Called it Crystal Night because there's so much broken glass. Now, I ask you to consider one thing that it's just a token, but it seemed to mean so much to the Jewish people when we've done it. And under the Oak Initiative, we encourage all of our member churches and things to consider on November the 11th giving some piece of crystal to, if you have Jewish neighbors, or a Jewish synagogue in your town or city or whatever, to give them something, a nice piece of crystal with just a note that you're thankful for them to be a part of our community. We're thankful for the Jewish people. I used to write a note saying, Abraham was promised that his seed would be a blessing to all the families on the earth, to every family on the face of the earth. And they have fulfilled that promise. The Jewish people have been a blessing to every family on the earth. We received our Messiah through them, the scriptures, and not even to count the multitude of other major blessings that the Jewish people have been in communities throughout the world where they were scattered, even though they were often kept in ghettos and other such things. As I'm going to shift this a little bit, but I guess I'm still in the sun. But just think about writing a note like that or whatever to the synagogue or Jewish neighbors and just tell them how thankful you are for them. You know, we were promised, those who bless Israel are going to be blessed. Those who curse Israel are going to be cursed. And but we would send a little note like that, and also saying, and we want you to know, we stand with you. That what happened to you in Germany, and what has happened, and listen, it was the Jewish people were subjected to throughout Europe for over 1,000 years, mostly at the hands of those who called themselves Christians, who threatened the extinction of the Jewish people. If we just stand with them, that will not happen here, not on our watch. That we will stand with them, and how much we appreciate them and the gift from God that they are. Just something encouraging like that. I know when I did that, you can't believe some of the letters we got from, rabbis and different synagogues. They were so touched. I didn't know. I hoped it wouldn't be offensive. You don't know. You just do something. Step out to do something like that. But it was unbelievable, the responses that we got. I don't remember ever getting a single negative response. But I'm just saying, this November 11th is coming up. Please consider doing something like that to overcome this evil with good. But don't just write a letter, and don't just buy some crystal. Let's resolve we are going to be their friends. We're going to be their supporters. We're going to be their defenders if it ever came to that. And that we too would watch out and stand with them against any such attack. Now, right now, churches and at a synagogue are the number one target of such assaults. And we need to be prepared for that. And there are, many now who are security experts on church security, and to help churches to be prepared for any such assault, so an attacker can be stopped, and the damage or the injury done reduced, if not stopped altogether. And I really encourage you to do that. We've got some specialists in our fellowship, MorningStar, and we can put you in touch with. And we try to carry their materials and promote them occasionally. But that's the world we live in now. And to me, when the scripture said, that if we don't take care of our own and the members of our own household, that we're worse than infidels. It's provide for our own. And to me, that's not just providing food, clothing, covering, shelter. It's, as need be, defense and security. We've got to provide whatever it takes to take care of our own. These are the times we live in. Anyway, so we're getting calls for unity. The president and the media, they're all calling for unity, but it seems like right now everybody's saying, but let's unify in a certain way. You quit calling me something bad, but I can still call you, divisive or whatever. It's true. It's happening, wherever it happens, it shouldn't happen. And, but will that work? Will calls for unity work in our country? We're so divided right now. And so how do we get there? How do we get there with unity? Now, I think we're so far from unity. That is so far down the road. I think we need to have a little more modest expectations, and maybe even a call for something more modest, like let's just start respecting each other, trying to honor and respect all people. The Lord said, as we treat even the least of his little ones, he's going to take it as how we treated him, the Lord himself. So let's start at least dialing back the rhetoric, of course, or especially unbelievable, the calls for violence and all that have been going. That's unimaginable. And when someone does that, they should be legally responsible for anyone injured, anyone hurt, any damage done by such violence. They should be legally. I believe they are legally accountable under our system already, under the laws of our system. It's just nobody has thought about that or done anything about it. But yeah, people need to know, yeah, you do that, you are going to pay for this yourself. You start making calls for violence and confrontation, and it gets out of hand, you will pay that bill. That may help bring it back some. But, unity's a lot. I mean, the churches, how far are we from unity among ourselves? Find any family that's in real unity. And so that is a great ultimate goal. But let's start with a step in that direction that we can all do and do pretty quick. And I believe let's just start dialing down the rhetoric. And especially calls for violence. It is, a crime to cry fire in a crowded theater because people get hurt. Well, it should be a crime. If it's not already a crime, I believe it is, but it definitely should be a crime for anyone who calls for violence, and to make them accountable. These are some things I think we should do, and that's not a hindrance on freedom of speech. Freedom of speech has always been limited. Never could you just say anything you wanted, like screaming fire in a crowded theater, because people got hurt. So there's always been limitations. What we want is as much freedom of speech as we can have while, not subjecting people to dangers and threats and things like that. So I'm just saying, I think this is good. I think we should be praying. We should be fasting. We should be beseeching the Lord to raise up clear voices of sound, wise leaders on every level of government and influence in our culture. And things that I do think, as a friend sent me a word a few weeks ago, that she had an elaborate prophetic word about this, the high water mark of the rebellion has been reached. And things are going to start receding. Well, now's a good time for them to start receding. And we can be a part of that. What does the Lord promise the peacemakers? Now, that doesn't mean we don't continue speaking out and speaking out boldly and loudly about the things we believe. But we should never call for violence, especially Christians should never have any part in anything like that. I met a whole group of Christians. I was riding my motorcycle up on the parkway one time and pulled off on one of those areas they've got set aside where they're called overlooks, where you look at the great mountain views and all. And I'm sitting there just looking, a whole bunch of motorcycles pulled up, and it was a gang. They were white supremacists. And they recognized me. And they came over, wanted to talk. They'd been reading my books and all, which I'm thankful. I'm thankful any extreme group starts reading my book. Hope it helps. Hope it helps them to come to their senses and repent of some of these attitudes. Well, they were telling me what they were believing in and everything. I said, wait a minute. I said, listen, and I challenged them on their beliefs. And I had enough of a platform with them, enough respect for them. They listened to me. And we both rode our separate ways afterwards. I was appreciative of the way they listened to me. And I hope I made a difference. I hope they left that group. But listen, Christian, we cannot do it. Racism is one of the ultimate evils on the planet. It's one of the things the Lord warned about being one of the major evils in the last days. And we talked about nation rising against nation. That was ethnos would rise against ethnos. That was the Greek word he was using there. It wasn't talking about countries fighting each other. It was talking about ethnic conflict. being one of the major signs at the end. So I think, we can't get involved in that kind of thing. Anything that calls for violence, attacking others, anyway, physically, uh, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. You get involved in that, any Christian gets involved in that, you've taken up, you've sided with the devil. And you say, what's the difference in that going in the military? Big difference. The way it really reads when the Lord gave the commandment, do not kill, thou shalt not kill, was thou shalt not murder. And there's a big difference when you're defending yourself, defending your people, your family, as opposed to calling for violence and murder, such as was done. So, anyway, those are just a couple of things. Haven't ranted in a while, so I'm going to catch up. Also, want to talk about just briefly, the elections in Brazil, Germany. Remember years ago, 2014, when I started inquiring of the Lord about who the next president would be, he told me two things. He said what we needed, he didn't tell me who it was, he said, but what we needed was an alley fighter, a person who could fight in a lot of directions at once because they were going to be attacked from all directions at all times. But another thing he said patriotism is going to win. And he gave me as a sign, he said the New England Patriots were going to win the Super Bowl that year. And they did. Now, this was real early. I don't even know if the NFL season had started when he first spoke that to me. But they did, and I knew it was a sign. I knew it was the Lord. And it's winning around the world. And that's what I told you back then. I said, it's not just our country. But patriotism is going to start winning around the world. And it is. Merkel's out. She's resigning as head of her party and head of her country. She's not going to run for re-election. She's been one of the most powerful leaders in the world. This wave of nationalism, patriotism, is sweeping the world. And, Brazil, this guy is a patriot. He's a Brazilian patriot. And he is conservative. I don't know, you read some of the things about him, he may be taking things a little bit too far. I don't know. I don't know that much about him. And I was warned that too. I gave a warning about that. I actually wrote it in 1987 in a book that I wrote in 88, published in 89. I received the word about this in 87, was that there was going to be a big swing to the left in our country. And then we would swing back to the right and would never turn back to the left. Maybe a little bit here and there, but we'd never make that big swing back to the left. Wasn't going to happen in our country again. But he said one of the dangers was that we went too far to the right. We have to guard against that. Extremes on either side are dangerous. But why is it that patriotism is so important to God? And I believe it is something, it's really important to him. And it's because he gave the nations. He's the one who formed the nations and said he gave them boundaries. Because every nation has a glory. Every nation has something to contribute to the whole. I really believe when the Lord says he was going to make man in his image, he was saying, I'm going to make mankind in my image. And it's going to take all the different cultures and tribes and nations together to reveal his character, who he is, the different aspects of him. And every nation has a glory, it has a heritage, a history, and none of them have a perfect one. Most of them, there's a lot of real evil in their history. But that's part of the story. The whole earth has that history. But the Lord wants it preserved. He even gave a curse for anyone who would remove or move the ancient boundaries. So I believe it's right that we have great respect and love and all for our own country. You'll never have true spiritual authority for anything you don't love, because true spiritual authority is built on love. You'll never have authority in your country, not in a major way, if you don't love your country. Never have authority in your city if you don't love your city. Jesus, when he felt compassion for the sheep who were without a shepherd, he became their shepherd. His authority was built on his compassion, his love. So we have to have that to have true spiritual authority from God for our nations. Because we love our nations, because we're thankful for wherever God has put us, whatever nation he's put us in, that doesn't mean we don't like the other nations. Doesn't mean that we don't love them. We're supposed to. Every one of them are Christ's inheritance, we're told in the Psalms. The nations are his inheritance. And in the other prophecies. So we should love them all. But you have to take care of your own household first. And that's a first responsibility. And that I intend to obey as much as I can. And but I think that should be true of whatever nation you're from, wherever you're from. Honor and respect. Honor your fathers and mothers. Those are your national fathers and mothers as well as your physical fathers and mothers. Respect them and honor them. Give honor to them. That's the only commandment with a promise that it will go well with us and that we will dwell long in the land that the Lord has given to us. So let's do that too. And I'm a conservative. I was a liberal at one time. I was past liberal. I was past progressive. I was way out there. But, right now I'm a conservative. I'm center right. A lot of people think I'm extreme right, but I think those people think that it's because they're so far extreme on the left. They look at people in the center as extremist in the other direction. But according to, I know people way out on the right of me too. And because I can see people just about as far out on either side, I think I must be in the middle somewhere. Most areas I probably am. But the point is, though I'm a conservative, we owe our nation to a high degree to liberals. The birth of our nation. One reason the New England part of our country is still very liberal. They were very liberal when they started the revolution. The conservatives wanted to stay under England, wanted to submit to the king. It was the liberals. And the patriots in our Revolutionary War were virtually all what we would consider today liberals. Now, they didn't have a lot of the liberal philosophy and all that people have today, that we call liberal today. It's a whole different thing. Matter of fact, John Kennedy, considered one of the greatest Democratic presidents, even though he was assassinated, only served less than 3 years, I think. But he said some great things, and he did do some great things. Today, if you took his political philosophy, then today he would be considered pretty far on the right wing. He would be right of most Republicans today. Democrats don't want to hear that. No, check it out. Check out what he said and did in his policies in many areas. Some he was pretty liberal on too. I'm just saying. And it's tried to say many times over the decades, an eagle needs a right wing and a left wing to fly. And right now, we're trying to fly basically on the extremes of both wings. We need the whole wing too, not just the extremes. And I do believe it is time to dial back the rhetoric, time to show respect, and maybe find one person we can dialogue with that we know disagrees with us. Just take a step, just with one. Don't try to do it with large groups or anything else, unless you have a serious authority and platform in that area. Just try one and then try to listen. and try to show respect. You can disagree. That you can be totally you can totally disagree, but not be disagreeable, not be rude, and not try to shout each other down. Let's just try that and see what happens. It's hard to do. I get into it with my daughter sometimes. We really get into it with each other, but we still love each other. I get some of her best, kindest, loving messages after we've had a battle. Making up is always fun. But I'm just saying, bless your hearts. Thank you for listening to today's rant. And if you want to check out already what I was talking about, the messages from those recent conferences, they should be in our bookstore now, or be getting out there very soon. And get excited. God is really moving in a major way. Thank you for listening to today's rant.